Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into some absolutely groundbreaking neuroscience to answer a pretty fascinating question. How could a single day fundamentally change the physical structure of your brain?
I know. It sounds a bit like science fiction, right? Structurally rewiring your brain in just one day. But today, we're actually looking at the hard, peer-reviewed data behind how psilocybin acts as a profound catalyst for structural neuroplasticity. We're not just talking about a temporary mood lift here. We're talking about a measurable physical reorganization of how your brain processes, categorizes, and recombines information.
Here is our flight plan for This Explainer. We're going to cover 1. The brain's habit machine, 2. Disrupting the default mode, 3. Building new neural pathways, 4. The integration window, and finally, number 5, rewiring mental health.
Let's jump right into Section 1. The brain's habit machine. So the antagonist in our story, if you want to look at it that way, is the default mode network, or DMN. This is basically the brain's habit machine. It's this constellation of interconnected brain regions that completely dominates our brain activity when we're just sitting around thinking, not really engaged in an external task. It governs our planning, our rumination, our autobiographical memory, basically that continuous narrative we tell ourselves about who we are and what the world means. Now, under healthy conditions, it balances out with other networks. But when that balance breaks down, well, that's when we run into problems.
And what's truly fascinating here is how this specific network connects to almost every major mental health struggle. In conditions like depression, OCD, addiction, and PTSD, the DMN becomes hyperactive. It gets incredibly rigid. It essentially locks people in these endless ruminative loops that just resist disruption. Cognitive flexibility, which is our ability to shift perspectives and escape these ingrained thought patterns, literally collapses. And this pathological rigidity is exactly why the DMN became the primary target of psychedelic neuroscience in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2, disrupting the default mode. Okay, so psilocybin, via its active metabolite psilocin, hits specific receptors in the brain called 5-HT2A receptors. These receptors are densely packed in the primary output cells of the default mode network. When psilocin activates them, it acts like a massive system override. The regions of the network literally stop synchronizing with each other. They entirely lose that tight, rigid control they normally maintain over how you process information.
Scientists actually call this the rebus model, which stands for relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. Think about the rigid brain for a second. It's stuck in habitual patterns with heavy top-down predictive control. But under psilocybin, we see a shift to a profoundly flexible brain. We see increased entropy, which basically means the brain enters a state of much higher information diversity. Bottom-up sensory information just flows more freely. It is a massive systemic loosening of the brain's habitual architecture. And this disruption isn't just random noise. It's highly therapeutic. Clinical trials, specifically a very rigorous 2019 study, show a remarkable 34% improvement in cognitive flexibility measures. This includes improved decentering, which is your ability to distance yourself from habitual negative thoughts and just observe them without identifying with them. The medicine is quite literally altering the cognitive architecture that generates the symptoms in the first place.
This brings us to Section 3, building new neural pathways.
To really understand the physical rewiring, we have to look at BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Psilocybin triggers BDNF signaling in the prefrontal cortex. Think of BDNF as a powerful, specialized fertilizer for the brain. It supports the growth and maintenance of synaptic connections, basically allowing the brain to physically reorganize itself. This right here is the biological foundation of flexible, adaptive cognition.
Now we have another 34% metric, but we're measuring something entirely different from the last time we saw that number. Incredibly, preclinical research demonstrated a 34% increase in dendritic arbor complexity. So what does that actually mean? It means the physical extensions of your neurons, the branches where synaptic connections form, are literally growing and becoming more dense and complex. So it's not just a chemical wash we're talking about, it is actual physical growth.
Let's look at the timeline for that growth. At 0 hours, the medicine is administered. Within just 24 hours, the brain hits peak increases in dendritic spine density. But here is the absolutely most important part. At 4 weeks, those vital structural changes persist. The drug has completely left the body, the acute pharmacological window is long closed, but the physical structural change in the brain remains. How wild is that?
Let's transition to Section 4, the integration window.
Zooming back out from the cells to the actual patient, it's absolutely crucial to understand what this means for treatment. These cellular changes mean the drug opens a window of opportunity. It is not a magic bullet on its own. And this brings us to the PSI model: preparation, session, and integration. This model is the true hero of the healing process because it pairs that temporary biological plasticity with structured psychological therapy. Preparation isn't just signing consent forms, right? It's cognitive priming, really bringing those rigid patterns into focus. The session opens that period of enhanced structural plasticity. And integration, well, that isn't just a debrief, it is directed learning. It's the intensive psychological work done while the brain is physically primed to replace those rigid cognitive patterns with flexible ones.
To put it into a brilliant analogy directly from the source material, the session opens the door. The integration determines what is built in the new space. Psilocybin is essentially the key that unlocks a state of neuroplasticity, but the integration therapy is what actually furnishes the room. It determines whether those structural changes we just talked about persist as permanent therapeutic patterns or if they simply dissipate.
And finally, Section 5, rewiring mental health.
The crucial takeaway here is that we are operating at the level of process, not content. You see, psilocybin doesn't just treat depression or addiction or OCD as distinct, separate entities. It restores cognitive flexibility across the board. It treats the shared underlying process of pathological rigidity. It breaks the negative loops of depression, the compulsive cycles of addiction, and the trauma-conditioned responses of PTSD by fundamentally targeting the brain's rigid processing architecture.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this to ponder. As this science evolves, how will society rethink mental health treatment? Are we going to continue to just manage symptoms? Or will we embrace treatments that use neuroplasticity to structurally rewire the habit machines of our own minds? The data clearly shows that the flexibility to change is physically built into our biology. Sometimes the brain just needs the right key to unlock it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the big questions.